Hello everyone, and welcome to Wayfair Coding Academy's How to Linux series, where the goal of this series is to cover all things Linux, from the basics like standard installations and learning how to use your system, to more advanced topics such as advanced installations, customizing your system, and learning how to use various programs available on Linux. As one of the first 3 videos of this series, the goal is to demonstrate one of 3 different methods for installing a Linux operating system. This is because while distros may differ between each other with their specific install processes, the processes themselves are usually the same across the different setups. The method that will be covered in this video is a full install. The upside of a full install is having full access to RAM, processing, graphics, and storage. The downside, of course, is that you will lose the originally installed operating system, which means you will also lose any data that was stored, so be sure to back up anything important before you get started. The distro I'll be using for this video is Fedora, specifically the Fedora Workstation 40 Everything ISO. This is because the goal of this video is to focus on how to perform a full install. So I'm choosing a distro that should be relatively easy to install but will still include the most common steps of an installation process that will be important in this video. So if you want to use a distro that is different from the one in this video, that is fine. As long as the distro has a graphical interface for the install process, you should still be able to follow along. Also, Fedora is my preferred distro, and it's what I use for any video that doesn't require a specific distro, like all the programming tutorial videos that I put out. In order for you to get your distro, you have to go to the website that hosts the distro. For Fedora, it's fedoraproject.org. Once you get to the webpage, up top there are several tabs. We're going to go to the Get Fedora tab. We just mouse over it, this will automatically drop down, and when it does, we look for the link to Workstation. Once you click on it, we get to this page and then we click on download. This will take us to the Fedora download page. As I mentioned earlier, for this video, we're going to be installing Fedora Workstation 40. So we're going to go over here and we're going to download the one for Intel and AMD 64 systems. We can do that by clicking on this link here. So go ahead and click on this button here to download the ISO. And while that's downloading, I'll walk you through the rest of this download page just to show you all the other stuff that Fedora can offer you. And even though this is specifically the Fedora page, this will give you an idea of what to expect from other Linux distribution websites because they also offer a whole bunch of different options for downloading their Linux distribution. Now, starting with what we have right here, first we have the Fedora Media Writer. Now, the Media Writer, I'm not entirely sure if only Fedora offers this. I don't know if any other distro offers something similar to this, but what it does is it basically makes it a lot easier to set up the bootable media for your ISO. It basically takes care of that step for you, which you can get that if you'd like. However, part of this video is basically showing you the basic steps that most people would follow in order to install Linux. So I'm also going to include how you set up bootable media in this video. That's why we're just downloading the ISO file here. And then on this side for the ISO, as you can see, we have different architecture options aside from Intel and AMD. On top of that, Fedora offers live ISOs. What the live ISO does is it basically allows us to preview the operating system that we're thinking about installing before we actually install it, which is pretty cool. And I'll show a little bit of that later once we actually load up the ISO itself. But on top of these files, we have additional alternatives in terms of how to download a file, as well as different types of files to download for a particular Linux distro. And Fedora is not the only one to offer this. Like I said, plenty of distros do this as well. Debian, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE, pretty much any Linux operating system out there is going to offer different types of alternatives for their Linux system. For Fedora Linux, we scroll down a bit to the Other Downloads button, and we're going to go ahead and click on that. And now it'll take us to this page for alternative downloads. The first item you're going to see is a network installer. There's a number of distros that will offer this as well, so it's not unique to Fedora, but basically what the network installer is a bare minimum ISO that will provide what you need to actually start the installation process. The only thing it doesn't have are the packages. All the packages that it will need to build your system will be downloaded from the internet as the install process runs. The network installer will also provide more options for you to configure the system the way you want, so you can select what packages you want installed, as opposed to it just installing everything like the file that we're downloading right now. On top of this ISO file, we also have different ways to download larger ISO files. The ISO file we're downloading right now is about 2 gigs. It's not too big, but it could be considered big for some people with slow internet. Fortunately, Fedora and many other Linux sites offer torrent downloads, so if you use BitTorrent, then there are BitTorrent options for downloading large ISO files. They also provide alternative architectures, as well as cloud-based images and testing images and the Rawhide. Rawhide is basically like the beta development version of the next stable release for Fedora. Once the ISO file has finished downloading, we now have to turn it into a bootable media so that we can actually start the installation process. I've got my Fedora Workstation 40 right here. Now we need to write it to a bootable media. Now we have two options for setting up a bootable media, either through a flash drive or through a CD or DVD. Now I prefer the flash drive because flash drives are more reusable. Once you finish using it as a bootable media, you can wipe it and then continue to use it as regular storage. Or you can set it up to be a bootable media for another operating system. Plus, it's like a one-size-fits-all sort of thing too. An 8GB flash drive is more than enough to cover all the different ISOs out there. With CDs and DVDs, however, they're kind of a one-off sort of thing. You can load them up with the one ISO file, but then that's pretty much it. That's all they can ever be used for. You can't wipe them and replace them with something else. Now, I don't actually have the equipment to do an actual CD DVD writing process, but I can show you the initial steps so you at least know what to do. So once you have your CD DVD writer set up, whether it's built in or you have to get a portable one, and you have it loaded up with a CD or DVD, right-click your ISO file and look for this option here, Burn Disk Image. This option will only show up when you right-click an ISO file. So click on it, and you should get this window to pop up. For Disk Burner, you're going to select your device. I obviously don't have one, so it's going to be blank. And once you select it, you click Burn. This will burn the ISO file to that disk. And the reason we have to do it this way is that you can't simply just drag and drop an ISO file to the CD or DVD, because then it's not bootable. You just stored the file itself onto the disk. Once it's done, you can eject the disk, and then you can move on to the actual step of booting up into the CD or DVD. Now for flash drives, we actually have to use a different piece of software. And unfortunately, Windows does not come with a built-in version of the software. We have to go online to download one. There's a couple of good ones out there. My recommendation is something called Balena Etcher. Once you've downloaded and installed it, go ahead and run it, and you get this interface here. So we get a number of options of how to select our file. Since we've downloaded it, we're going to say Flash from File. I'm going to select my live ISO, click Open. The next step is to select the device that we're going to write the image to. So we select Target, and it'll provide us a list of devices that we can write it to. It's going to by default show all the USB devices that we can write it to, like my Kingston data drive for 8GB. The dropdown for the hidden devices are typically going to be your system drives, and that's the reason why they hide them, so you don't accidentally select one of those and try to write your ISO file to one of your system drives. That would be a big no-no. So if I click on it here just to show you, so see, it's, as you can see here, it's got system drive and everything, and it's got the little big yellow exclamation marks to make sure you really know, hey, don't select these drives because that's kind of part of your main system. So I'm going to mark my Kingston drive, then I'm going to click select, and then I'm going to click flash. Now, depending on how big this file is going to be, it might take some time. So at this point, I would just say be patient and it'll be done soon enough. But while it's doing this, you might see some Windows messages pop up like insert a disk into USB drive E. I've seen that appear a few times. That one doesn't really make much sense, but if you see that, just hit cancel and close any windows that might appear from it modifying your flash drive. When the flash drive is finished being written to, you're definitely going to see a message come up and say, hey, your flash drive is unusable, we need to format it. But just ignore that, hit cancel, hit X, close everything out, and then unplug your flash drive for the next step. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you've seen that there's like some extra steps involved setting up the machine in order to actually do the install. For example, for virtual machines, we had to load up the BIOS and change the setting just so that we can install 64-bit virtual machines. For dual boot installs, we had to actually modify the partition table so that we could install the Linux system side by side with our Windows operating system without actually wiping the Windows operating system. Fortunately, for a full install, we don't have to do any of that. The only thing we do need to do is look up what key we have to press in order to access the boot menu for our machine. In order to determine which key you need to press for the boot menu, you have to look up your motherboard. Now, for manufactured machines like Dell, Asus, Acer, HP, so on, you can just look up the model of your machine to figure out the boot menu key from there. For custom built machines, or for machines that are from iBuyPower or CyberPower PC or so on, you need to actually look at your motherboard and look up what the boot menu key is for that motherboard. But once you figure out what you need to do in order to access the boot menu for your machine, turn off your machine, insert the bootable media, then turn the machine back on and access your boot menu. Now, I can't actively record this menu for you because it's before the graphics card kicks in, so my capture device can't actually capture it as I'm using it, but I will take pictures so you can see what it looks like. And basically what it does is that it will list all of the devices that are potentially bootable. When it comes to the internal hard drives, if it can tell what's on the hard drives, then it will list those as well. So in my case, as you can see in the images, it can show my Windows Boot Manager as well as the Fedora partition that I made for the dual boot video. But for other things such as my flash drive or maybe your CD DVD writer, it's just going to show the name of the device itself. It's not going to be able to tell you what's actually on it. So go ahead and select your bootable media. For me, that's going to be my flash drive. Then you should see another boot screen pop up. This is the Grub boot screen. Grub is the boot screen that you're typically going to see for a Linux operating system. You're going to see it when you're running a bootable media, and you'll see it when you're booting up your actual operating system, because that's how you can select your actual operating system or even access the recovery mode and so on. So for Fedora, at the top of the list, we're going to see Start Fedora Live Workstation. So I'm going to highlight that and press Enter. And eventually we should see this screen pop up. So now we're in the live desktop session, and we can check out the desktop if we want, or we can start the actual installation. I'll quickly show you guys around real quick, and then we'll get the actual installation started. So this is what the desktop technically looks like, but when you hit the Windows key, you can actually access this menu here. You can access the apps in the little bar down here, and then you can access any other apps you might have. You can also type in the search bar for any specific apps you're looking for. Fedora comes with a number of apps installed. We've got LibreOffice, which is basically a free version of Microsoft Office that you can have installed on your machine. We've got our terminal program, we've got a text editor, we've got a number of things, and we can actually run these and actually check them out right now. The only thing we can't do is make modifications to certain settings and save files, because this is running off of our bootable media. So let's go ahead and start the actual install. So go down here and click on Install Fedora. It'll take a moment for the install program to load, but once it actually does, the first thing we'll see is a language selection screen. The first column is to select your spoken and written language, and the other column will be to select your keyboard configuration. So I'm going to choose English, and I'm going to choose United States. We then click Continue. We'll then be greeted with the installation summary screen. It's just a menu of options of things that we need to go through in order to configure our system for the install. A lot of other Linux distros with graphical installs will have more options to them on the screen than what we have here. Fedora basically minimalizes what you need to go through in order to configure your system for the install. The main thing we have to worry about Fedora is the keyboard, your time and date, and your installation destination. We've already set our keyboard, so we're going to go to time and date, and from here we can choose our time zone. It's already set to Americas, and it's set to New York time zone, which is good enough for me, so I'm going to leave this alone. We then have to go to the important part, the installation destination. This is where we tell it where to install the Linux operating system. Now this is a full install. We're going to wipe the hard drive of the original operating system and install Linux over it. So there's a few things we need to do. First, of course, is to make sure that the hard drive is selected, which in this case it already is. This little black circle with the white check mark means that this hard drive has been selected. We then go to storage configuration. Now, you can do this however you want. For the sake of this video, I'm going to leave it at automatic. But if you want to customize how your partition table is set up, then you can choose custom or advanced custom. The other thing we have to do is we need to check this box here. Free up space by removing or shrinking existing partitions. This is basically telling it that we want to wipe the entire hard drive before actually installing our Fedora Linux operating system. And if you want to encrypt your data as well, you can check this box here. It's going to ask you for a password. You're going to have to enter that password every time you boot up the machine, because that's how you access your operating system and the data stored on it. So once you've selected your options, click Done. And since we checked this box here to free up space, it's going to show you the table of the space that we have to free up. Just to keep things simple, I'm going to say delete all, and then click reclaim space, and then it's set up and ready to go. All it's left to do is to click the button begin installation. The install is going to take a bit of time, but it shouldn't take too long, and pretty soon you will have your own Fedora Linux operating system ready to go. Once the install is finished, click the finish installation button. It'll bring you back to the live desktop screen. We're not actually loaded into our newly installed system. In order for us to get into our installed operating system, we have to restart the machine. And it's important to restart it properly. So go up to the power button and click the restart button, and then click restart. Now, in some cases, depending on how your boot menu is set up, it might actually just boot straight back into your bootable media. So I would actually recommend shutting down your machine completely and then removing your bootable media so that you can turn it back on with no issue. However, most machines are set up so that the boot order will cause it to boot from the hard drive first. But once you boot back up, you'll be greeted with a first time setup screen. So go ahead and click on this button here. The first thing that pops up is going to ask you to connect to your network. I personally just hit the skip button. Then it's going to ask for certain services. I'm just going to disable both of these. I don't need them. Disable, please. There we go. Sorry, as I'm recording this, I have to look at it through the OBS recording screen because it's at the first time setup, it's not letting me change my display settings to have it mirror the screen. So I have to look at OBS to actually complete this part. So hit next. Now, third-party repositories. I would recommend enabling these because there's going to be a lot of times there's going to be software that you need or want that you can only get through third-party repositories. For example, if you're a software developer and you want to use VS Code, that's done through a third-party repository for Fedora. Certain drivers, especially for graphics cards, you're going to need to have this enabled as well. So I always say enable these. Next, now it's asking you to create your user account. So go ahead and put in your information. Hit next. It's going to ask you for a password. Next. And then that's pretty much it. And after that, you're pretty much ready to go. You're already logged into your user account, so you can just go ahead and start working on your system. There's no logging out or restart needed. And that's pretty much how you do a full Linux install. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it helpful, and if you did, be sure to hit the like button and leave a comment below to let me know what you think. And if you want to see more, head on over to the Wayfair Coding Academy channel to check out my other content. And while you're there, consider subscribing to the channel to stay up to date as new stuff comes out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.